The Emperor of Mankind is satisfying. And I mean that. He's the boss. And there's just something so utterly cathartic when the most powerful man in the history of 40K's human race spices up a scene. But I want to share a very particular scene that I think sheds some light on an often overlooked and misunderstood power this Titan of Warhammer lore possessed, because I have some thoughts. The moment I'm going to share is a personal favorite. It comes from the amazing novel, The Master of Mankind by the always awesome ADB, Aaron Dembski Bowden. Spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't read it yet. Go read this, okay? Now, in this moment, the Emperor speaks with his custodian guardsman, Ra, via psychic projection. By the way, if you're into the Custodies, read this. It is a must-read, actually. It's really told from their perspective and really sheds some light on the guardsman's relationship with their Lord Master. See, we often focus on the guard aspect and forget that they were purposefully created to be his companions, minds and souls for a living deity to connect with. That's an interesting notion when you consider that he made Primarchs. But I digress. Now, Ra has been fighting in the webway tunnels for years by this point, exhausted but resolute in his duty to keep the forces of the warp from entering the throne room of the Emperor, where his rotting corpses sat upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years at constant psychic war with the Chaos Gods and their demonic forces. He summoned Ra away from battle to enlighten the warrior. For reasons unknown, the Emperor has shown Ra glimpses of his very own divine past, explaining to Ra through experience the why behind his actions and decisions to rule. Using this unprecedented access into the inner mind of his lord, Ra mentions the heresy. He wants to know why the Emperor, with his psychic might and ability to foresee the future, could not see the treachery of his favored son. So let's take a peek into that conversation. In a heartbeat, the Ulanor triumph was gone, banished between breaths. Ra and the Emperor stood alone on a rocky shore, ankle-deep in icy salt water. They faced a great cliff, reaching up hundreds of meters, sheer in many places, sloped in others. Even as Ra stared, loose rocks clattered down its surface, splashing into the rising water not far from where they stood. "Where you stand now," said the Emperor, "is the present. Do you see the top of the cliff?" "Of course, sire." "That is the future. You see it. You know what it is. Now reach it." Ra hesitated. "Now?" "Climb, custodian. You question the nature of my foresight. I'm granting you an answer." Ra moved to the rock face, looking over the stone, finding his first grips. He tested them, finding them strong even against the weight of his armor. The weaker ones he avoided. Less than 10 heartbeats had passed when a rock cracked and crumbled in his gauntleted hand. Ra skidded, arresting his fall by clutching at the stone. Another gave way, sending him the last few meters to the rocky ground in a breathy cloud of white dust. "You looked for places to safely grip," said the Emperor. "Yet you have already stumbled. You did not know the stone was weak. It looked strong." The Emperor smiled, and it was by far the most unpleasant sight Ra had ever witnessed. Okay, so the Emperor has schooled Ra on the nature of foresight by having him climb this cliff face. And he sees that no matter where he looks, no matter what things look like, you just simply can't know. And that's very, very important. So the Emperor goes on to sum up his lesson with this. "That is foresight, Ra. To know 1,000,000,000,000 possible futures and to be left to guess at the infinite ways of arriving at each one. To map out even one possible eventuality, taking into account every decision that every living being will make that will impact upon the others around it would take all the lifetimes I have already lived. The only way to know anything for certain," he trailed off, gesturing to the distant shore, "is to reach the other side," said Ra. Now, I find this passage absolutely amazing. I did the first time I read it too. Up until reading it, I always assumed lazy writing from GW, considering the Emperor's prophetic power and the utter catastrophe of the Horus heresy. I mean, how could a man who sees the future miss the single greatest moment of deception his empire will ever face? The way I see it now, the future of the 40K universe is constantly being rewritten. For the Emperor to read the future, he needs to know the destination he wants to see. Like a game of getting warmer, that desired future can fade or crystallize depending on the path of events he chooses to take. But here's the catch. Just because he chooses a path that leads to his desired future doesn't mean everyone else chooses the same path and the same future. So, he must always look at the larger picture, the big boy set of events going on in the galaxy, and he tries to steer and maneuver these events as best he can to keep the vision going, his vision going. He wants to stay warm, but looking at the big events and focusing energy there means he must sacrifice knowing the little things going on, like whether a clerk in some far-flung store on some far-flung planet of the Imperium turns to chaos, or maybe it's not the clerk, but the planetary governor, or a tech adept, or a space marine, or Primarch. See, Horus didn't have to turn. I think there were many paths to greatness he could have taken, but a perfect storm of moments throughout his life, chief among them his discovery on Moloch of the Emperor's own supposed treachery, as well as the utter manhood-slaying moment when Malcador flexed on 3. Let me repeat that. Malcador flexed on 3 Primarchs, including Horus. That was enough to send the War Master and ultimately the Imperium spiraling into flames. But that's just a theory. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments, all right? Regardless of anything, every single time the big guy shows up in this book, it is amazing. And I'm going to make more videos about a few of them, so be sure to like and subscribe if you dig the content. Oh, and if you happen to be a sci-fi, fantasy, or comic book author or creator, check out NTLT Book Covers. We specialize in these genres, so we'll set you up with a cover that'll absolutely rock your fans' world. Go to ntltpresents.com today, okay? Badass book covers for sci-fi and fantasy authors. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.